Several years ago, I was fixing a computer. I can't remember what component I needed to replace, but there was something I needed to do with the guts of the computer. And after taking it apart and replacing the piece that needed to be changed out, I put the computer back together. However, what I found out as I was cleaning up my desk after putting the computer back together was that I had 2 or 3 screws laying around that had somehow not gotten back to where they were supposed to be. And the worst part of it was I did not remember where they should have gone in the first place. Thankfully, after trying to turn the computer back on, it booted up successfully, everything went fine, and it continued living a long, happy life despite missing a couple screws. That story had a happy ending. Not so much the time that I was working on a lawnmower and went to change an internal component on that, and when I put it back together, same situation. I had 1 or 2 screws left over, couldn't figure out where they came from, and that lawnmower was pretty much doomed at that point. I never did get it back up and running. There was something going on with the internals, ended up selling it for parts. And it made the point for me at that point that I needed to make sure that I documented what I was doing as I did it, whether that was taking apart a computer or a lawnmower, make sure I had a diagram of some sort so I knew what went where as I was trying to put it back together, but also make sure that as I was working on whatever project I was doing, that I was careful and calculating as I worked on that project. And that really illustrates very well the attitude that we need to have as developers as we work on new features or updates or fixing existing functionality. We need to be very careful and calculating so that we can ensure that we do not introduce regressions or deploy bugs to a client that could significantly damage their business. And that's what this week's question touches on. Now, I do want to say I am just getting over a cold, and I pretty much completely lost my voice, and it's still not quite back yet, so just a heads up on that. Now, before we get into the question, make sure you check out SwiftOtter.com and the study guides and courses and videos and the other material we have available there. That is all going to be beneficial to you as you strive to grow and become a better developer. So let's take a look at the question that we have for this week. You delivered changes a week ago that included a new module which modifies customer data when a new customer is created. The module also includes a cron job that gathers customer details and recent orders into a daily report. Over the past week, you've noticed timeouts and errors occurring at roughly the same time each day, indicating server resource issues. And so the question is, what is likely the reason, and what do you need to do? Let's take a look at the options that we have available. Option A. There is a surge in customer traffic at that time, and the code that modifies customer data when being saved needs to be modified to handle the load. B. The cron job is scheduled at the same time as other jobs. You should adjust the cron schedule to run at a different time. And C. The cron job is processing too much data at once. You should update it to run more frequently to break the workload into smaller parts. Now, admittedly, this question and the correct answer can vary somewhat based on circumstances. I noticed a lot of people posted a different answer than what I ended up coming up with for this question, and there were a lot of different explanations as far as the reasoning behind it. Now, I've seen 2 situations that basically stimulated this question recently. There were similar circumstances to what this question covers, and so that'll explain some of my reasoning behind the answer that I selected as being correct. Again, there's different circumstances possible that could bring out slightly different answers and correct answers for this situation. But let's discuss these different answers. So option A, being that there is a surge in customer traffic and basically the code needs to be refactored to handle the load better. Now, while customer traffic can cause a problem, that is very unlikely to be the cause in this situation, based off of what the question states as the scenario, for two main reasons. First, the likelihood of there being so many customers creating new accounts that it causes a resource problem at the same time every day is practically zero. If there's a consistent problem every day at about the same time, you can pretty much bet, especially with a more limited use case, is something happening when a customer creates an order, that's going to be pretty unlikely. And the second reason is kind of stemming off of that first reason. When something's happening at a consistent time every day or every minute, I've seen that before, you can be pretty much positive that it is a cron. Obviously, some people live on a schedule. Some people have schedules more strict than others, but when we're talking about something very consistent, again, whether it's happening every day at pretty much the same time or every minute, you can pretty much bet that that is going to be a cron job with that level of consistency. So we're going to mark option A as incorrect. Now option B, the cron job is scheduled at the same time as another job or jobs, and basically the cron schedule needs to be adjusted so that there is a staggered time that these jobs are run at. Now this one resonates with me. I've seen a few different instances where the problem wasn't with quote-unquote bad code, but simply multiple resource-intensive processes running at the same time. It's not necessarily that things needed to be refactored, simply that there was just some intensive processes and they were scheduled to run at the same time and it was causing a problem. Because if you think about it, and this is obviously kind of exaggerating the issue, if there's a cron job that consumes 30 or 40 or 50% of system resources, hopefully there's not one that big, it's not going to be a super big deal. There's still 50 or 60 or 70% of those resources left. But if you have a few jobs running that are consuming 20 to 30% of the system resources at the same time, obviously you're going to run into a bit of a bind. That those system resources are going to get depleted pretty quickly. So option B is a good one, but let's take a look at option C. And that's being that the cron job is processing too much data at once, and basically it needs to be refactored so that it is running in smaller parts or utilizing smaller data as it's running. Now this is where the question can be a bit scenario based. In some situations, obviously refactoring the code is going to either be the fix or be a big part of that fix. Making code more efficient is going to resolve a ton of problems. Obviously that should be our focus as we are working towards developing new functionality, is making sure that our code is very performant, it's not going to introduce bugs, basically making sure that what we write, what we develop is efficient code. However, depending on what features we're working with, we may not have the luxury of breaking the code out to run in smaller sections or to use smaller sections of data. We may have, depending on the functionality that we need to build, we may have a cron job that needs to be pretty system intensive and it's going to take up quite a bit of resources. But in that case, it is going to be key, as option B mentions, to make sure that it's not running on top of other cron jobs that are going to be using a large amount of system resources. So again, option C in some scenarios could be the correct answer, but it still kind of pushes back to option B, where we need to make sure that our schedule is set up to where we're not running intensive processes on top of each other. We have a lot of flexibility with the cron jobs and the schedules that we set, so we need to use that flexibility to make sure that those resources are being used in a proper way or in a way that is more staggered so that each job, each process has the resources it needs to run successfully. So with that being the case, in the scenarios that I worked on or heard about, option B was the correct answer. That was the fix. The cron job the schedule for that cron job needed to be updated so that it wasn't running on top of other cron jobs. Each one had a section of time that it could run in and be successful. So that is what I have selected as the correct answer. Again, to reiterate, there are many situations where refactoring the code is going to help a lot. However, either way, making sure that you don't have several processes running at the same time is going to be good for your system resources. Now, if you have any thoughts, please drop them down in the comments below. Thank you for watching.